Israel is about to do against Iran. Something very, very ominous, something that is brewing for a long time. Right now, it is at a boiling point. This is what Israel will do or is planning to do against Iran, and that will happen most likely very soon. We have seen what what Israel did last month. They held a war game in the North Israeli city of Almat, port city of Almat. 7 countries, other countries, they joined, and they have planes, fighter jets going into the sky. We also have seen what Israel is doing at the Red Sea. Red Sea, they are holding drills with Bahrain, UAE, and other countries. US is leading them. They are doing one after another exercise, one after another naval exercise. We have seen Israel, and I reported this before, they have now come up with this new electromagnetic warfare system where they are pioneering, and they're getting ready for attacking Iran. And I made this comment before many times. Now, this is coming very soon, and this is not coming from me. This is coming from BBC. They have reported something very interesting. And when I was reading this, I was very surprised. I mean, yes, I expected this to happen, but so fast and at this pace, I did not expect it. But this is what is happening right now. US military defense, as you can see on the screen, and UAE and Bahrain and many other countries, I must say, they are now at a point where we might see a strike against Iranian targets by Israel very soon. So why I'm saying this and what is the reason for it? Now, I mentioned in my other video about the nuclear enrichment. 60% of 20 kilogram reached its purity. In other words, BBC and the mainstream media and the experts, they are now saying that Iran can make a nuclear weapon in a matter of 1 month. In a matter of 1 month. However, they would need several more months for the nuclear warhead to be put or installed on a nuclear warhead like ballistic missile. That would take time, yes, we understand. However, if Iran does have enriched enough uranium, then game over. For them to put it on a nuclear warhead would not take much of a logistic supply, logistic requirements. They would not need that, because putting that nuclear warhead on a ballistic missile would be something they can do even from their backyard. But purifying those uranium, those enrichment, it will take Iran to have those nuclear facilities. Israel is saying right now that we cannot wait for the November 29th, end of this month, in just a matter of 1 week, for the meeting to be held. As we know, Iran is going to be talking with the other countries to revive the nuclear deal that was made in 2015. But Israel is now preparing openly, not ignoring it, not denying any report. They are openly preparing to strike Iranian targets as soon as possible. Why? Because again, that 1 month, once November 29th meeting is over, if they are not lifting any sanction over Iran, then the next thing you know Iran would do is they will go ahead and make those those nuclear weapon right away. As you can see on the screen, Iran is very much becoming an aggressive nation, aggressive country when it comes to preparing this nuclear weapon. So let me tell you this. Such drills, so the drills that we have seen in the Red Sea, is aimed, according to BBC, is aimed to send a strong warning to Iran, which has recently been holding its own large military exercise and stress strategic alliances. Iran is also preparing on its own. Why? Because Iran doesn't know what is going to happen when this meeting will take place with other countries, if the nuclear deal will be revived, or if that nuclear deal will be gone and they will not be able to have those freedom of doing trade and business and commerce with other countries. If Iran sees there is no possibility for the nuclear deal to be revived, Iran is only taking 1 month. This is why we see preparation from both Israeli side and also Iranian side. Both of them are now doing exercises, military exercises. They're holding drills, as you can see this soldier here, and they are stressing at the same time importance of coalescing with other nations. So Iran is going to be most likely asking Russia for help or China for help, and they will ask them, if in case something happens to us, you guys will defend. Now, but this drill of that Iran is doing, they come at a time, the timing is so important, everything is happening in just perfect time. The time, it is coming at a time when many in Israel, they are worrying about whether this small country could soon feel forced, small country means Israel, 8 million people live there, to act alone to attack Iran's nuclear program militarily. This is a growing concern, this is a growing talk in Israel happening right now. As we know, Israel, they have allocated $1.5 billion or 1.1 billion pound, UK pound, to prepare the Israeli armed forces for a potential strike against Iranian nuclear sites. And there are near daily warnings from political and military leaders, end quote. Again, it is not something I'm saying, it is not something some random people are saying. We have seen it with our own eyes every single day. We're seeing that Israel is saying to Iran, enough is enough, we are coming after you tomorrow. We are coming after you right now. We are coming after you this day. And we are seeing those issues of threat are happening on a regular basis. This is not something to be played with. And I have been seeking, so the BBC, the reporter, he said, I have been seeking out the views of top Iran watchers and analysts on what might happen. He said, one of the top Israeli security officials, he told, quote, Israel has no interest in a war with Iran, but we will not allow Iran to acquire nuclear weapons. This is coming from a security official from Israel. He said, and quote, in light of Iranian progress of their nuclear program, we are preparing for all options and scenarios, including military capabilities. So, I mean, this is coming from the top of the top, you can imagine. And they are now saying that, look, we will have no problem, living with Iran in the Middle East, and we are okay. We are not an enemy of Iran. We do not want any war. However, we cannot live with a nuclear Iran, end quote. And this is the end of it. This is the period. This is where they stop. This is where everything stops. Israel believes, after this they spend or allocated in the budget $1.5 billion, they believe the Iranian nuclear program and Iran with nuclear weapon is going to be an existential threat. And this is not something Israel will take easily. Why? Because we have seen over and over again, Iran is saying to Israel that you guys, many of the politicians in Iran government, they say and they believe that Israel doesn't have any right to exist, and that Israel will come to an end. It will cease to exist, quote unquote. I'm quoting them. It will cease to exist. Israel is very, very concerned about this kind of statements. We know in the past, Iran said we need to wipe them out. So the point here is that for Israel, it is absolutely clear that once Iran has a nuclear weapon, it is going to be a threat they cannot match with any technology, any weapon they have, because it is something beyond anybody's power once you have the nuclear weapon. The rating comes as talks between Iran and 5 world power plus the US indirectly on reviving the 2015. So this whole thing happening when we will have the JCPOA, basically means Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. They are due to resume end of this month in Austria capital Vienna. The JCPOA limited Iran's nuclear activities and opens its facilities up to enhanced inspections in return for the partial lifting of international sanctions. However, it was abandoned, we know, by US President Donald Trump back in 2018, and Israel approved it. What Israel is doing right now, two things they want. Okay, two very important things that you have to understand here. Number one, Israel is saying that we cannot lift these sanctions from Iran. At the same time, we cannot have Iran to have a nuclear weapon, because there are two reasons for that. Because if Iran's sanction is being lifted, then obviously what Iran will do is that they will become economically very powerful and reach to a point where they will be able to economically make a lot of money. The country, they can support it without needing the help of US and many other rich nations. As a result, once they become self-dependent financially, they will be eventually making those nuclear weapons. Israel knows it, and this is why they said do not lift sanctions. At the same time, Iran wants to have the nuclear weapon and Israel doesn't want them, because if Iran has the nuclear weapon, then of course the game is over for Israel. So Israel doesn't want either of them. No lifting sanction, no nuclear weapon. What Israel is doing right now is trying their best to sabotage the nuclear facilities. So they sometimes assassinate a scientist. Soleimani, he was assassinated. There was another scientist, Fakhrizadeh, he was assassinated. So Israel, whatever they're doing, they are all very covert. These are not open attack. They're doing it secretly, trying to weaken Iran's nuclear program by sometimes attacking the scientists, sometimes going after the military general, sometimes going after the facilities themselves. Israel cannot come out openly and say we want to stop Iran at any cost, but that time is running out. In other words, Israel is about to go and attack Iran, and there will be an all-out war between these two nations. Just as the date of a new round of talks was fixed, quote, Iran declared it had produced 25 kilograms of uranium enrichment, and it has, as I said in the beginning, Iran also has developed 60% of 20 kilogram of uranium enrichment. 60%. That would put Iran within a range of 1 month to become a nuclear power country. And this is, again, Israel, they do not want to happen at all. So they are willing to do whatever it takes. So the point here is that the Iranians today, okay, they are closer to creating fissile material for nuclear weapons than they ever were in the past. Iran has reached to a point, to a degree of this nuclear weapon enrichment that it had never been in the past. What is the reason for that? It is for the obvious reason that if this JCPOA conference is failed, Iran is ready. Iran is ready with nuclear weapon, and they are going to not listen to anybody. They are going to create those nuclear warheads and send it off to Israel's way. We know, recently I have reported on this too, they have come up with this electromagnetic system where they can shoot down multiple targets at the same time simultaneously. Iran, one way Iran would be able to attack Israel, very, very important, would be through drones and arming Houthi rebels and Hezbollah. If they can do this, then Iran will just sit back and play games with those drones and be able to target Israel. So Israel is now getting even more concerned with all of these developments. If Iran thinks that Israel is just like Saudi Arabia's Aramco oil company, we have seen what they have done with the Saudi Aramco oil company. They were sending these drones, and these drones were so deadly, they were actually able to destroy some of these facilities partially. If Israel becomes the next Saudi Arabia for Iran, and Iran is capable of carrying out those drone attack against Israeli facilities, It could be Israeli military facilities or even nuclear facilities if they know where it is. Then Israel is going to be in a long haul of conflict with Iran. In other words, Israel will be like, yeah, man, this is not going to end very soon, and this is going to be a huge headache for all of us for a very long time. As a result, what Israel might do is that they might come up with this plan or with this idea that, you know what, we cannot have Iran doing this to us. We cannot afford to spend billions of dollars every year, every month, try to protect ourselves. So let's get it done with. Let's go after Iran. This is the time, November 29th. If that thing doesn't pan out the way Israel wants and US wants, then we will see an all-out war. Not conflict. This time it will not be a conflict, because this is an issue for Israel, a existential threat, as they have mentioned over and over again. And Iran is feeling very comfortable. Iran, the Iranians and its allies, whoever supporting Iran, they're feeling 100% comfortable with this whole situation, because Iran is about to have the nuclear weapon. At the same time, these countries are benefiting from Iran by making financial deals. For example, China, they promised to invest $20 billion in Iran and its infrastructure and energy. And this deal was signed only recently. These whole countries, all of them, they are very, very confident and comfortable dealing with Iran. At the same time, Iran is ready to defend itself in case something happens. With the 60% uranium enrichment, they are not feeling any threat. In fact, if there is one party to lose, it is going to be Israel. Iran has nothing to lose. The reason for that is because they are under tremendous sanction. They overcame this whole pandemic thing on their own. US did not lift those sanctions for the Iranian people when they needed those pills, those jabs and whatnot. So Iran is not going to now back down saying that, oh yeah, all of a sudden we need them. No, that is not going to happen. So Iranian nuclear crisis is only getting much worse. World powers, they do not trust Iran. Some countries believe Iran wants nuclear power because it wants to build a nuclear bomb. It denies this. So a deal was struck in 2015. Iran and 6 other countries joined in, and they said, we cannot trust, but let's put something on the paper. At least that way we will know what you are doing, and you at least make a formal promise that you will not have a nuclear weapon. The manufacture of such a weapon would also require making a warhead that could be mounted on a ballistic missile. The time frame for that is more difficult to calculate, but again, some said it will take several months for Iran to actually be able to have that nuclear warhead mounted on a ballistic missile. But regardless of what it is, Iran is not going to back down. Iran is not going to feel any threat from Israel. If this talk fails, they are going to go and make that nuclear weapon, and Israel, before Iran does that, will try their best to annihilate Iran, and that is really the only option they have. Thank you guys for joining in for this commentary. If you're new here, consider subscribing. I will see you soon again on the next video. Have a wonderful day.